Hey astronauts, welcome back to the Digital Galaxy Podcast. I'm your pilot, Justin.
And I'm your co-pilot, Paul. Buckle up because today in episode 43, we're discussing some major bombshells about Facebook. The information in this episode comes from CBS News and MSN. So, Justin, can you fill the crew in on what's happening with Facebook?
Yeah, so on Sunday, October 4th, 2021, 60 Minutes on CBS interviewed Frances Haugen, a former Facebook employee. She has made some major claims about the company and how it can be destroying our society. But before we get into the interview, I'll give a little background on her. Frances Haugen was a 37-year-old data scientist from Iowa with a degree in computer engineering and a Harvard's master degree in business. For 15 years, she's worked for companies including Google, Pinterest, and she also worked at Facebook for about 2 years before she quit this past May.
So, what exactly was discussed in this interview?
Oh, well, there's a whole lot. Really don't know where to start.
True,
But
very true.
I guess the biggest one is standing with her thoughts on how Facebook prioritizes money over anything, really.
Yep.
This is from the transcript provided by CBS News. Quote, Facebook has realized that if they change their algorithm to be safer, people will spend less time on their site. They'll click on less ads. They'll make less money, end quote.
Mm-hmm.
So she's basically blaming a lot of hate, spreading of lies, and other factors that have divided us on their decision to actually change the algorithm.
Yeah, and rely on that algorithm. The 2018 algorithm change prioritized posts with higher user engagement, and it turns out that lies and anger rank off the charts for those posts. Facebook decided to create programming that the company decided what you see on your feed, which is, the algorithm we're talking about, and posts with a lot of likes and shares lands on people's feeds and literally feeds into the hate, division, and misinformation on there.
So Haugen continues in the interview, quote, and one of the consequences of how Facebook is picking out that content is it's optimizing for content that gets engagement or reaction. But its own research is showing that content that is hateful, that is devised, that is polarizing, is easier to inspire people to anger than it is to other emotions, end quote. This type of content keeps users on the platform, which just keeps people engaged because it gives you a different type of emotion every time you see it.
Yeah, a very strong emotion
Exactly.
for that matter. Yeah, I mean, even Facebook saw the danger in it, in the 2020 election, and they did institute a lot of changes that limited misinformation and enabled safety systems. However, once the election was over, a lot of those safety systems were removed. Facebook was used heavily to organize the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Internally, employees of Facebook were questioning the company they worked for. Those internal documents were released by Haugen, and here is what some of the employees were saying. Quote, haven't we had enough time to figure out how to manage discourse without enabling violence? I don't think our leadership team ignores data, ignores dissent, ignores truth, but that drew this reply. Welcome to Facebook. I see you just joined in November 2020. We have been watching wishy-washy actions of company leaderships for years now. And one last quote here from employees of Facebook. Colleagues cannot consciously work for a company that does not do more to mitigate the negative effects of its platform.
Which is crazy to me
Yeah.
because, I mean, Facebook definitely played a big role. I mean, all social media platforms play a big role in something as big
Right.
as the election. And seeing all these different implementations of different policy changes on these websites and them just being pulled the second the election is over is just a little strange.
Yeah.
They
I agree.
know how their platform makes money, and they're not afraid to use that to their advantage.
I agree.
So after seeing all this internal chatter, it's Facebook's own research study results that are most shocking, especially with their studies on Instagram. Scott Peely, the CBS anchor that conducted the interview, said this, quote, one of Facebook's internal studies that finds that if you talk about how Instagram harms teenage girls, One study says that 13.5% of teen girls say Instagram makes thoughts of suicide worse. 17% of teen girls say Instagram makes eating disorders worse. And I mean, those are big
Yeah,
numbers.
it's true. I mean, the effects are extremely harmful. I mean, just when we talked about like the documentary that we talked about last year, it was just seeing how easily Instagram, Facebook, whatever, any social media kind of affects people, and that the company knows about it. It's Facebook's own studies that have gathered this information about its own platform. And Haugen adds to this statement with quote, Facebook's own research says it is not just the Instagram that is dangerous for teenagers, that it harms teenagers, is that it's distinctly worse than any other form of social media,
And I
end quote.
completely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Instagram is definitely the big one. It
It is.
is the big one. And I mean, you still see it today. I mean, I'm 21. I'm not in high school anymore, but I mean, even in high school, like it's Instagram is everything, and it becomes these kids' lives. It completely comes to what they depend on sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and you just see it. You're seeing it more and more and more. And I mean, we did discuss in a past episode that Facebook was actually looking at an Instagram app for kids.
Ugh, yeah.
Thankfully, they've postponed that, and hopefully they don't release it at all. I really think
Yeah.
that is a terrible, terrible idea.
Right. And the news that they postponed it just came out recently, right before all these releases, too. So I'm sure they thought it would be bad press to keep going on that, pursuing that app. But, there is so much more to discuss. However, we should start winding things down.
Yeah.
I do want to know what do you think Haugen's aim was for the interview? Like, why do you think all this information was released?
So she told the Wall Street Journal, quote, if people just hate Facebook more because of what I've done, then I've failed. I've been in truth and reconciliation. We need to admit reality. The first step of that is documentation, end quote. She even expressed the empathy for Mark Zuckerberg in her 60 Minutes interview, stating that he didn't envision his social media platform to produce so much hate, but she hopes this interview motivates the company to do better and put regulations in place. And
I hope so too.
I mean, it needs to happen. It's not something that people should just wish for. Like, it is something that absolutely needs to happen. And not just Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, all of it. Because
No, it's true. I mean, we've even talked about in this podcast like the dangers of some of these social media platforms, and that regulations need to be put in place, and there does need to be some oversight because it does feel like the Wild West on the internet right now.
it's going to continue
It's
to be
pretty
the
wild.
Wild West, too.
Hmm.
Unless, I don't know, things change.
Yeah,
But
something's got to change.
that'll just about wrap up this episode. Thanks for coming along. Please stick around to hear a message from our sponsor, Anchor.fm. Also, don't forget to follow our channels on Twitter, YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. You can also find this episode in the written form on our website, digitalgalaxypodcast.com. This episode was created by Clearo, a social media app where you are in charge of your data and community. Check it out at Clearo.app. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you guys in the next one.
Digital Galaxy Podcast runs on Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. So let me explain. First of all, it's free. Second, there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you, so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. So download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.